Ladies and gentlemen, coming off of 9 straight green days in a row for the S&P, this upcoming week is going to be incredibly crazy. We have the Fed, which nobody's expecting that to be an event that moves markets because we're not expecting much of a change, but that's kind of the catalyst to move markets, right? When nobody expects something to happen and then we get new information. Yeah, that can move markets quite a bit. We have some comments from Trump out today that sound positive on China, but yet still no pause on China tariffs at the time of recording this video. We have lots of earnings that will be coming out, as well as other sets of economic data, some of which that will feed into your GDP report for Q1 that will maybe help push the needle, maybe make it not as negative or push it further into negative territory. I will share with you all of the details of these catalysts in this video. Now, in the news today, Netanyahu says that Israel will act against the Houthis after they fired a missile directly at Israel. Now, Trump had an ABC interview. The reporter asked, "So your message to those small businesses who are saying we can't live 2 months with these tariffs, Apple got a big deal. Is there something for them?" Trump says, "Not only Apple, we have $7 to $8 trillion being invested in our country. Everything is going to be just fine." And I think that's because Trump already plans on pausing the China tariffs. Everything's going to be just fine. He knows everything will not be just fine if he does not pause the China tariffs. He knows that. Come on now. He's not a stupid person. Okay? So, yeah. Take that for what you will. Trump says that he won't replace Powell before his term as chair of Federal Reserve ends in 2026. So that's great news. Donald Trump reiterates the Fed should lower interest rates. And he says that U.S. small businesses will not need relief. Okay, so again, he's going to pause the China tariffs anytime. Donald Trump says Canada does not carry their full share of military spending. Donald Trump says that Vance and Rubio are potential successors to him. And Trump is keeping the option open to make some tariffs permanent. Donald Trump on the TikTok ban says that he would like to get a deal done with China, but would provide an extension if necessary. A reporter asked Scott Besson, said the Chinese continue to say that the U.S. and China are not engaged in any consultation or negotiation on tariffs. Can you clarify? Besson says we're not going to talk about who is talking to whom. It was reported on Friday that China was willing to essentially talk about fentanyl, like cracking down on fentanyl, to start negotiations. And that seemed very promising. And then China came out and said, hey, we need some kind of good faith move from the Trump administration to show that they are actually serious about negotiating, because they started this, and that essentially just means pause the tariffs. You pause the tariffs, then we negotiate. Okay? That's what China's waiting for, and that's what I'm waiting for. That's what we're all waiting for from Trump. China lauds upbeat comments from China in this NBC interview. Trump says that he is planning to decrease China tariffs in the future. Okay? That's a good sounding. Both of those headlines sound really good. Question is, when do we get the pause, Trump? This week, we are going to have a ton of earnings. So tomorrow morning, you get Recursion, you get onsemi, BioNTech, Tyson, some others. In after hours tomorrow, you get Palantir, Hims and Hers, Ford, Realty Income, Bellring, Clorox. Tuesday, you get Celsius, Datadog, Ferrari, DigitalOcean, Marriott, Constellation, Array Technologies, and Global Payments in the morning. In after hours, Supermicro, even though they pre-reported, the official numbers will come out Tuesday and after hours. AMD, Rivian, Tempest, Energy Transfer, Arista, Astra Labs, Upstart, Win, and Lucid. Wednesday pre-market, Uber, Walt Disney, Novo Nordisk, Teva, Unity, Vistra Energy, Barrick, Flex, Oscar, and Bunge. Wednesday and after hours, AppLovin, Carvana, ARM, Cleveland Cliffs, Axon, DoorDash, Dutch Bros, Oxy, and Catalyst. Thursday pre-market, Peloton. Didn't even know they were still in business. Didn't they go bankrupt? I don't know. They were close. Shopify, ConocoPhillips, D-Wave, HUD 8, Kronos, Warner Bros, Discovery, Crocs, Thursday and After Hours, The Trade Desk, Coinbase, Mercado Libre, Marathon Digital, Cloudflare, SoundHound, DraftKings, Affirm, Wolfspeed, and InnoData. And then Friday morning, TeraWulf and Enbridge, couple other lesser known companies there. So really this week, it's like AI, retail stocks like, Palantir, AI as well grouped in there, Hims and Hers, right? A lot of software names, right? AppLovin, Datadog, again, Palantir, Tempest, another big AI name. So specific sectors are going to be important this week. Like these earnings are not going to move the broader markets necessarily. AMD, maybe, some of the chip stuff on semi maybe could boost the chips as well. ARM, maybe that helps boost the chips because we still have NVIDIA earnings that have to come out over the next couple of weeks. But specific sectors will move a lot from these earnings, okay? So it's really a sector by sector kind of week, not necessarily like a broader, S&P moving week for earnings. We will get that when NVIDIA reports again in the next couple of weeks. Now, starting off tomorrow morning, we have S&P Global Composite PMI, final numbers for April, and services PMIs for April. And then you get ISM services PMIs. This is the Purchasing Managers Index. So it is soft data, but Wall Street tends to pay attention to it. So headline ISM is expected at 50.6. Last month was 50.8. So you're expecting it's going to get a little bit worse. Business activity expected to fall about 3 points. Services employment expected to actually rise. New orders expected to fall about 1 point. And prices are expected to rise. If prices fall, which I'm sure they probably won't with tariffs, right? If they do fall, that's a great thing. Overall, you want to see these numbers come in as high as possible besides services. Okay, services can come in, or prices can come in as low as you want with all of the other components, going up would be a great sign. Higher activity with less inflation. Now, on Tuesday, you will get the balance of trade for March. This will be important because it will feed into GDP. Exports and imports, again, will feed into GDP. So depending on how those numbers are, it will kind of tweak the Q1 GDP numbers. Last week, it was reported that we contracted 0.3%, okay? Based on some of this data coming out, it may show maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. Maybe there's going to be an upwards revision to GDP. Vice versa, if the numbers are not great, there's going to be a downside revision, and it's going to get even more negative. Now, at 9 o'clock in the morning as well on Tuesday, RCM/TIPP Economic Optimism Index, expecting that to get a little bit better. And then you do have a 10-year bond auction at 1 p.m. On Wednesday is going to be really the big day. Fed Jerome Powell, we're not expecting the Fed to do much, not really expecting the Fed to say much, okay? Not a lot has changed, okay? Now, if Trump pauses the tariffs on China, then I think the Fed will take a more dovish approach. An approach like, hey, if the tariffs are not as big as we think they are, if trade deals get done, they're going to be able to cut rates more, okay? If not, we're going to get kind of the same old Powell, which I think is a mistake because, again, if we're not getting goods out of China and there's a lack of products on shelves and that causes inflation, there's nothing the Fed can do about that, okay? Minimizing the economic damage would probably be the best route here. I'm not the Fed. Apparently, they don't agree with that. So we're not expecting much of a change. That does set you up for a big catalyst. Because why? If we're not expecting anything to change and something does change for the better or for the worst, well, that turns into a big catalyst, okay? So surprisingly enough to say this out loud for some people to hear this, I actually think people's expectation of the Fed being a non-event on Wednesday actually makes it an event when we get new information. If we get new information, if there's a new shift from Powell, something along those lines, okay? So be on the lookout for that. 2 p.m., the report comes out. 2:30 p.m. as always, Powell comes out and gives us that speech and takes questions. The speech is the actual event. The presser, not really much of an event. Now, we do get consumer credit change for March as well, expecting that to be positive almost 10 billion. Last month was negative almost 1 billion, which I actually think that's kind of important to watch in this environment. Initial jobless claims will come out Thursday, expecting 235,000. Unit labor cost, non-farm productivity quarter over quarter, preliminary data for Q1, continuing jobless claims, wholesale inventories, which will feed into, again, GDP. That is for the month of March. All of that data comes out in the morning before the bell. And then nothing else throughout the day on Thursday. On Friday, a speech from Fed Williams and Fed Barr at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Some unemployment rates out of Canada, Fed Kugler, Fed Goolsbee, Fed Waller, Fed Williams, Fed Cook, Fed Hammock, and Fed Musa-Liam will all speak on Friday. So a bunch of Fed speakers, again, depending on how Wednesday goes, that may or may not be a catalyst for markets. Now, I'm optimistic by Friday you're going to have a pause on China tariffs. I think we're going to get overall headline tariff news, good or bad, in this week. And that is what is also going to help drive markets. If we get a pause on China tariffs, I think markets are going to explode higher from here, right? I think we're going to have a great week. If we don't get that, then you're kind of starting to come down to the wire, right? You're kind of starting to get to a bad place if we don't get a pause on China tariffs. Like every day we don't get a pause, it creates more economic damage, okay? That's a fact. So whole time markets are going up, more damage is being done. There will be a reckoning of that if there is no pause on China tariffs. Don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Don't know exactly what day that's going to be, but eventually that will happen. So we want to be on the lookout for that. So let me know what you think about all of this down below in the comment section. Again, I actually think markets can move higher this week, but you're starting to get tapped out until you get this China trade war situation worked out. If you don't get that worked out this week, then I think you have downside pressure on markets. If that gets worked out this week, hopefully soon, then you have that upside momentum for markets, and probably quite a bit of it. Couple percentage points at least, I think, would be in the cards. Again, because it's going to crater recession odds. It's going to make earnings more predictable, less, economic pain. Like, there's a lot of reasons why pausing China tariffs would be positive from an equity perspective. And I think that could easily push us back close to that 6,000 level on the SPX, 600 or so on the SPY, which would be roughly upside of about 6% from here. So let me know your thoughts on all of this down below in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.